Okay. And what is the usual range out of curiosity for signups? Like, is there a range of registrations? Hi,
Hi,
Lauren.
Lauren.
Hi.
It's anywhere, we've had anywhere between 20 and 30.
Yeah. We're here. We're ready to go. I have a little intro I'm happy with.
Oh,
And
we can't
I
hear
feel,
you.
oh yeah.
Lauren, I think you're muted.
Magic. Did that, is it, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. So, how's everybody?
Good. How about you? Did you get
I
coffee?
was saying that I'm about 15% less nervous than last week. So
Perfect.
that's exactly. I'm feeling like each week.
That's like a one bite of pizza. If you imagine if you imagine a whole pie having 8 slices, you're
Exactly.
a half a slice of pizza less nervous in the whole pie. It's, you
Uh,
know, it's pretty good.
it's pretty good.
That is
By next
good.
week, you'll be down to a quarter of the pizza.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I figure each week a little less and a little less. By the end, I'll be totally myself and
Yeah.
natural. I'll be a
Yeah.
natural.
You did great, and your writing is brilliant. I wanted to say the thing you wrote that I posted on Instagram was just so elegant and beautiful and passionate and clear.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear that because,
Yeah,
yeah.
you're a superstar.
Thanks, Lauren. Nice to hear that. Don't really believe it, but I'll try.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, exactly. Fake it till you make it. Fake it till you make it. Ding, ding, ding. Put your hair up. Put your smile on.
I'm going to get a hair clip real fast.
Do we have any idea what Diego's got up his sleeve for tonight, Lauren?
Yeah, I think that he's got nothing. Uh, yeah, he just wrote me he was unable to find any diagrams that represented the experiment better than the ones already in the reading. Would it be okay for me just to show those? I can still explain and talk about the effect while showing the images from the reading.
Okay.
So
Well,
let's just empower him.
yeah.
I mean, it's like literally less than a 15th of a pizza. Oh, you have to be adaptable in this. So I would just say when he gets on, what we can just say is if everybody wants to pin his, pin his screen, you'll see like him do a little 5-minute explanation about the optical stuff.
Yeah, it'll be a Diego interpretation, which will help
Yeah.
us, understand it more just hearing
It's just
it.
going to reinforce it. I had a completely different image in my head.
Me too.
But I also have learned you never know. The miracles can surprise you.
They sure can.
It's true.
It's true indeed.
And everybody's loving learning, and that's really what we're doing this for. So
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
got lots of positive feedback from last week, and people are very excited about. Now, are we supposed to call her Ruth Ann Barnett, or what's like the going name that we're using?
Well, I mean, I guess Ruth Anna. I guess Ruth Anna Barnett.
Okay.
No Ruby. No Ruth Anna. I
Okay.
guess is what it sounded like in that email. But I think really what she wanted was to say that she had a PhD, and so that we
Dr. Barnett.
But,
yeah, basically.
but we did cut that part of the text. We cut it, so it's it's
Gone
still in the
completely.
it's in the Eventbrite, but it's not in our intro.
Yeah, perfect. That's fine. That's good.
Did we send her a direct link, Jen?
She's on our mailing list. I can send her another one though.
Maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to just ping her the direct Zoom in case she wants to join.
I'll do it right now.
It's
Yeah.
always nice to get something,
Yeah, personal.
Good idea. I'll do it right now.
that way if she wants to do any explaining, she can.
I know. I would like it if she would join. It would be great.
Yeah, it would be great.
Mm-hmm. I'll encourage her too, like,
Yeah,
hey,
we'd
join
love
us.
I told her we'd love her participation. So
Yeah.
do those go on? Are those speakers or lights?
I think it's on. Fine.
Roxanne's here too.
Oh, nice.
Oh, hi.
Good.
We're at the barn. We're in the garage
Nice.
We're looking for lights.
for a change. Ooh, nicely played. That makes a huge difference.
So Lauren, just curious, why did you want to skip the bee box? I was kind of excited.
Because I couldn't find any material to show that's ready to show.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Young,
we can
young
incorporate-
Padawan is here.
The
Hello,
young
Diego.
Hi, how's everyone?
How's our most favorite birdologist?
Oh, I'm good. How are you guys?
Good. We're
That's
excited
sweet.
for your explanation of optics today.
Oh yeah. Thanks.
Whatever you do is going to be just what we always wanted, so don't be nervous.
Yeah,
Thanks, Lauren.
yeah. Yeah, and it gets less I was telling Lauren, I'm 15% less nervous this week than last week. So
Which
don't
I
worry.
said, if you imagine a whole pizza, it's one slice cut in half less nervous.
Nice.
Why? But I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Would have never thought of it, but I love it.
The foodie
Diego,
and-
do you want to test your screen share?
Yeah, sure.
Make
Let me
sure-
test it. Okay, how about this one first?
That works.
Wait, can you do the full page? Can you
Yeah,
make
like
it?
that.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you.
So that's our second reading,
Yeah,
Diego.
so I have
Yeah.
the first one too.
Cool.
Stop the share.
Perfect. And did it make
Wait,
sense?
this is the.
I was thinking.
Here we
That's
go.
a double
That's
take.
one.
Yeah, that's the one. And those little yellow marks say where to begin and end.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
for this one, for the optics thing, I mentioned to Lauren, but I wasn't able to find a diagram that showed this any better than this one here does.
Yeah.
So I guess I could just talk about it, showing this part of the screen. But I know on the flow it said that there would be a separate illustration example.
Yeah, just emphasizing it and going back over it for a couple minutes, Diego, so that we all can understand it more deeply
Yeah.
will work. You know what I mean?
Okay, great.
Yeah. Okay.
I think I'm working on a raven too.
My uncommon raven.
You found them.
What, my uncommon raven?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I'm
Wonderful.
I'm now working on 4 unfinished pieces.
That's the way to do it. I've got a couple going myself.
My uncommon raven.
Oh, it's
Nice.
so
It looks
cool.
great.
Gosh, these are really great, these embroideries, you guys. And I'm not just saying that. They're freaking cool.
Oh, I love that.
Wow.
I haven't
So
seen that in a
nice.
minute.
That one is like,
Well, I don't know what it is. It's under a microscope. It's micro.
it's micro. It's the entanglement
It's a micro thingy.
exactly. The true nature of entangled reality.
Yeah.
Working on that.
I'm doing an entanglement. My embroidery is called entanglement, micro entanglement.
Absolutely. Okay.
Well, we
Is
got
it
people
time?
waiting. It's
Show
time.
Take deep breath.
Right. So
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4,
3, 2,
1.
1.
Millionaires in space.
Millionaires in space.
Off.
Elon takes off. Oh, goodness.
That's going to solve everything.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. As we all are getting into our seats tonight and getting ready, I'm going to start off with our introduction. The Metabolic Studios Learning and Mending series is now in its 5th iteration. In this series, from micro to macro, we will be exploring the implications of an integrated form of systems thinking that allows us to think across scales. From particle, cell, brain, society, ecosystem to cosmic matter. From micro to macro, we'll build upon what we learned about from Anna Singh's Disturbance Ecology and have an emphasis on complexity, networks, and patterns of organization. Many of you have received embroidery kits from us of native plants, birds, and microscopic organisms that Metabolic Studio is currently cultivating on its project sites. Taken as a collection, all the embroideries will collectively illustrate biogeoconosis, which describes the intimate association between living things and the physical environment. If you have not received an embroidery kit or would like another one, please send your name and mailing address to info@metabolicstudio.org. We will share our screen, and we encourage you to read a section of the text aloud with us. When there is a pause in the reading, please feel free to unmute yourself and begin where the last person left off. Silence is golden, and there is no pressure to fill the transitional spaces while we enjoy a breath and continue crafting. Feel free to jump in and continue reading at your own comfort level. You don't have to read, it's also fine to enjoy listening. And what I want to share with you right now is our embroidery of the week. And truly, I get so excited with all of these because they're all so different and so unique and so special. But tonight we're featuring Cindy Bautista's Sunflower and Native Bee. And one of the things that I think is just so extraordinary about this one is that if you can notice, I'm gonna go real close so you can get a good look at it, and I'm gonna turn it at an angle. I just want you to see the bodies have like 3 dimensions to them. It's like they're really fuzzy. They're absolutely beautiful. And so if Cindy, if you could explain how you did this technique, that would be helpful. So if anyone would like to try to recreate this, if you're working on this tonight.
Sure. So when we get our thread into our needle or into the hoop, you just pull it out halfway or, like that much out, and you just keep stitching a couple of times. And when you fill whatever section you want at the end, you just go in with little scissors and like snip off the top, and it'll give you the little fuzzy effect.
So you're looping it.
You're looping it instead of pulling it all the way through the fabric. I stop, like maybe that much, and it gives you that effect. And I just learned it on YouTube, you guys. Honestly, I just YouTubed. I spent, I don't know, like 30 minutes looking at different little videos, and I found it and I tried it. It worked.
And Kelly, will pass it over to you to begin the introducing the authors and the readings.
Yeah. Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Yay, Cindy on the fuzzy bee. I love it so much. I really want to touch it, I have to say. So tonight we're going to continue on with our exploration of integrated systems thinking. And we're going to start off by hearing from two new authors this week, who I wanted to talk about just a little bit briefly so you have some context of the voices that you're hearing. Their names are Humberto Maturana and Francisco Varela. They are biologists and philosophers from Chile, and we're going to be reading their book titled Tree of Knowledge, The Biological Roots of Human Understanding. It was first published in 1987, and they're really well known, these two scientists, as pioneers of systems theory, actually, and cybernetics, and they're actually the originators of the term autopoiesis, which kind of came up in our discussion last week. It's a term that refers to the self-regulation and organization of living beings and systems, so autopoiesis. They're also the originators of the Santiago theory of cognition, which specifies that cognition is inseparable from the autopoietic activity of living beings. So really what this book looks at is how our own biology and cognition influences our perception of the world. And, they discuss how the meeting place between our minds and other phenomenon is a relationship that brings forth worlds. I love that quote. Or another quote from them: "We do not see the space of the world, but we live in our field of vision. We do not see the colors of the world. We live in our chromatic space." So they really bring that to the forefront in their readings tonight. And then the second reading, we're going to follow up with another reading from Fritjof Capra and his book, A System's View of Life. And just in case people don't know of Fritjof, I wanted to give you a little background about him. He's Austrian-born American physicist, a systems theorist, and a deep ecologist. And he also founded a Center for Eco-Literacy in Berkeley, California. He's a really prolific author and quite interesting to learn from and with. And tonight's reading from Capra focuses on the mental shift from thinking in terms of individual objects to thinking in terms of relationships and processes. It's almost kind of a figure ground shift. And he really advocates for us to emphasize a better understanding of relationships, since they're truly the underlying structure of living systems. So based off of these two readings, I have two guiding questions for us tonight that we can kind of hold in our minds. I'll put them in the chat. The first one is, what relationships and processes, both visible and invisible, can you think of that interconnect seemingly isolated objects? So relationships and processes. And then the second, are there examples from your own experience where your perception or cognition tricked you into believing something that turned out to be different when looked at from another point of view or when you asked another question? So I'll put these two questions in our chat just for sparking conversation when we're done, and I will pass it back over to Jen now.
Thank you. And before we begin with the readings, we're going to start with a quick embroidery time lapse that features a French knot. So if you want to change up your embroidery tonight, this might be your inspiration. Let me just share the screen. Kind of ends abruptly, but you get the idea on how to make a French knot, hopefully. And if not, at the end, we can discuss it, because I believe Cindy's actually done them before, and I think a couple of other of you have done them as well. But now we'll begin our reading.
I'll start off. Just to remind everybody, we all self-elect ourselves to read and jump in when you feel like reading and when you feel like reading. The Tree of Knowledge. We tend to live in a world of certainty, of undoubted rock-ribbed perceptions. Our convictions prove that things are the way we see them, and there is no alternative to what we hold as true. This is our daily situation, our cultural condition, our common way of being human. Now, this whole book is a sort of invitation to refrain from the habit of falling into the temptation of certainty. This is necessary for two reasons. On one hand, if the reader does not suspend his certainties, we cannot communicate anything here that will be embodied to his experience as an effective understanding of the phenomena of cognition. On the other hand, what this book aims to show by scrutinizing the phenomena of cognition and our actions flowing from it is that all cognitive experience involves the knower in a personal way, rooted in his biological structure. There, his experience of certainty is an individual phenomena, blind to the cognitive acts of others, in a solitude which, as we shall see, is transcended only in a world created with those others. Surprises of the eye. Nothing we're going to say will be understood in a really effective way unless the reader feels personally involved and has a direct experience that goes beyond all mere description. So instead of telling why the apparent firmness of our experiential world suddenly wavers when we look at it up close, we shall demonstrate this with two single examples. Both correspond to the sphere of our daily visual experience. First example, cover your left eye and stare at the cross in figure 2. Hold the page about 15 inches away from you. You'll notice the black dot in the drawing, not small in size, suddenly disappear. Experiment by rotating the page a bit or opening your other eye. It is also interesting to copy the drawing on another sheet of paper and gradually enlarge the black dot until it reaches the maximum size at which it disappears. Further, rotate the page so that it is in the place where it is in the further rotate the page so that point B is in the place where point A was, and repeat the observation. What happened to the line that crosses the dot? Actually, this same situation can be observed without any drawing. Simply replace the cross on the dot with your thumb. The thumb looks as if it is cut off. Try it. Incidentally, this is how the observation became popular. Marriott, a scientist at the French court, showed King Louis by this process how his subjects would look beheaded before he had their heads cut off. The commonly accepted explanation of this phenomena is that the image of the dot or the thumb or the subject in that specific position falls into the area of the retina where the optic nerve emerges. Hence, it is not sensitive to light. It is called the blind spot. What is rarely stressed in giving this explanation, however, is how come we don't go around with a hole that size all the time? Our visual experience is of a continuous space. Unless we do these ingenious manipulations, we will not perceive the discontinuity that is always there. The fascinating thing about the experiment with the blind spot is that we do not see that we do not see. Second example. Let us take two sources of light and place them as in figure 3 and 4. This can be done by making a paper tube the size of a strong light bulb and using some red cellophane as the filter. Then place an object such as your hand in the beam of light. Note the shadows on the wall. One of the shadows looks bluish green in color. The reader can experiment by using different colored transparent papers in front of the lights and different light intensities. The example here is as surprising as in the case of the blind spot. Why do we get a bluish green color when we simply expected white, red, and mixtures of the white with red, like pink? We are used to thinking that color is a quality of objects and of the light they reflect. Thus, if I see green, it must be because a green light is reaching my eye. That is, light of a certain wavelength. Now, if we take an instrument to measure the light composition in this example, we find that there is no predominance of wavelengths called green or blue in the shadow we see as bluish green, but only the distribution proper to the white light. Our experience of greenish blue, however, is something we cannot deny.
I can take over. This beautiful phenomenon of the so-called colored shadows was first described by Otto von Guericke in 1672. He noted that his fingers appeared blue in the shadow when the light of his candle, in the shadow between the light of his candle and the rising sun. Confronted with this and similar phenomenon, people usually say, fine, but what is color really? As though the answer given by the instrument that measures wavelengths were the ultimate answer. Actually, this simple experiment does not reveal an isolated situation that could be called, as is often the case, marginal or illusory. Our experience with a world of colored objects is literally independent of the wavelength composition of the light coming from any scene we look at. In point of fact, if I take an orange from my room to the patio, the orange still seems to be of the same color. However, the inside of the house was illuminated by fluorescent light, which has a great number of so-called blue or short wavelengths, whereas the sun has mostly so-called red or long wavelengths. There is no way we can trace a correspondence between the great color consistency of the objects we see and the light that comes from them. It is not easy to explain how we see colors, and we shall not try to do so here in detail. But the important thing to explain it is for us to stop thinking that the color of the objects we see is determined by features of the light we receive from the objects. Rather, we must concentrate on understanding that the experience of color corresponds to a specific pattern of states of activity in the nervous system, which its structure determines. In fact, although we shall not do it right now, we can demonstrate that because these states of neuronal activity, as when we see green, can be triggered by a number of different light perturbations, like those which make it possible to see colored shadows, we can correlate our naming of colors with states of neuronal activity, but not with wavelengths. What states of neuronal activity are triggered by the different perturbations is determined in each person by his or her individual structure and not by the features of the perturbing agent. The foregoing is valid for all the dimensions of visual experience, movement, texture, form, etc., as also for any other perceptual modality. We could give similar examples that show us at one stroke that what we took as simple apprehension of something, such as space or color, has an indelible mark of our own structure. We shall have to content ourselves for now with the observations given. We trust that the reader has tested them. Therefore, we assume that the reliability of his or her experience has been shaken. These experiences and many others like them contain in a nutshell, the essential flavor of what we wish to say. That is, they show how our experience is moored in our structure in a binding way. We do not see the space of the world. We live our field of vision. We do not see the colors of the world. We live our chromatic space. Doubtless, as we shall note throughout these pages, we are experiencing a world. But when we examine more closely how we get to know this world, we invariably find that we cannot separate our history of actions, biological and social, from how this world appears to us. It is so obvious and close that it is very hard to see. And then I think we're going to stop here and go ahead a couple pages, Diego, and maybe somebody can pick up where that next yellow mark starts to summarize this.
Therefore, underlying everything we shall say is this constant awareness that the phenomenon of knowing cannot be taken as though there were facts or objects out there that we grasp and store in our head. The experience of anything out there is validated in a special way by the human structure, which makes possible the thing that arises in the description. This circularity, this connection between action and experience, this inseparability between a particular way of being and how the world appears to us, tells us that every act of knowing brings forth the world. This feature of knowing will invariably be our problem, our starting point, and the guideline of all we present in the following pages. All this can be summed up in the aphorism, all doing is knowing, and all knowing is doing. When we speak here of action and experience, we mean something different from what occurs only in relation to the surrounding world on the purely physical level. This feature of human activity applies to all the dimensions of our daily life. In particular, it applies to what we, the reader and the writer, are doing right here and now. And what are we doing? We are dealing in language, breezing along in a distinctive way of conversing in an imagined dialogue. Every reflection, including one on the foundation of human knowledge, invariably takes place in language, which is our distinctive way of being human and being humanly active. For this reason, language is also our starting point, our cognitive instrument, our sticking point. It is very important not to forget that circularity between action and experience applies also to what we're doing here and now. To do so would have serious consequences, as the reader will see further on. At no time should we forget this. And to this end, we shall sum it up all up in the second aphorism that we should keep in mind throughout this book. Everything said is said by someone. Every reflection brings forth a world. As such, it is a human action by someone in particular in a particular place. These two aphorisms ought to be like guiding lights that permanently remind us where we came from and where we are going. This bringing forth of knowledge is commonly regarded as a stumbling block, an error or an explanatory residue to be eradicated. This is why, for instance, a colored shadow is said to be an optical illusion. And why, in reality, there is no color. What we're saying is exactly the opposite. This characteristic of knowledge is the master key to understanding it, not an annoying residue or obstacle. Bringing forth a world is the burning issue of knowledge. It is associated with the deepest roots of our cognitive being, however strong our experience may be. And because these roots go to the very biologic base, as we shall see, this bringing forth of a world manifests itself in all our actions and all our being. Certainly, it manifests itself in all those actions of human social life where it is often evident, as in the case of values and preferences. But there is no discontinuity between what is social and what is human and their biological roots. The phenomenon of knowing is all of one piece, and in its full scope, it has one same groundwork.
Great. So now I think Diego is gonna share a little bit more about this optical illusion. It was a little bit hard for us to see on this electronic version. So we'll just kind of retouch on that before we move to our next reading.
Just to say, if people want, they can pin Diego's Zoom bubble for oh wait, he's screen sharing, so he can. Well,
Yeah, I am screen sharing.
Yeah.
So yeah, this diagram on the left is what Lauren was talking about. And basically it shows that on the left you have the red light or a white light that's filtered with a red filter. And then on the right you have a white light. And if you see on the top figure 3, the hand is in front of the red light. It's showing this colored shadow here on the reflection on the wall. And on the bottom, the hand is in both beams of light. So it's showing on the left here a red shadow because it's filled in by this red light on the left here, and on the right, the colored shadow. So what's going on here is basically that even though there's only white light reaching what we perceive as the colored shadow, the presence of this red light over here makes it so that inside your brain, the wavelengths are affected such that you perceive blue or green. And what's going on is not that there's blue or green wavelengths that are being reflected off of here exclusively, but that the presence of these two things in combination creates a state of perception which only exists in your brain and which you perceive as blue and green. So what you're seeing is an emergent property of this whole system, rather than being something that can be ascribed to a specific, just direct mechanistic happening with the wavelengths on the white shadow. So it's going on. It only presents itself that way because of your particular biological structure. If you were a different animal that had some different mode of gathering wavelengths had different color receptors, had different structure, it might, I mean, it would certainly be perceived a different way. So does that make things any clearer, or do people still have questions?
That was great.
Yeah. Thank
I,
you.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Izzy. Yeah.
I was just hoping maybe you could also explain a little bit the first one.
Oh yeah.
Really, I was trying really hard.
Yeah, I have done this in the past and I've been able to get it to work, but I think that any format that I've seen it on, like on a screen here, and I tried it with the thumb version too, but I don't know, I wasn't exactly able to get this one to work, but I've done it in the past to where things in your blind spot get obscured from your field of view. And it's kind of like when you don't need this the same thing is going on when you blink. I mean, you're just for a moment you have no wavelength, no light that you're perceiving, but your brain kind of fills it in so that you're not constantly, like, unless you focus on it, you're not constantly being, you know, plunged into darkness or having your perception interrupted. There's lots of other things that happen where your brain kind of fills in the rest, or takes what it is perceiving and uses that to like cover for something else that it's not actually directly perceiving. So yeah, and all those things are happening because when you're out and you're needing to communicate and find food and exist in a system, you can't be getting interrupted, your perception having it interrupted all the time. So your brain does something that allows you to better continue yourself in a system of relationships.
Izzy, I have a quick tip. I tried it last night, and so what I did is I brought the screen closer to my eyes, and I covered my left eye, and it works. So maybe moving your screen back and forth would help a little bit.
Okay, cool. I'll try. I'll look at the PDF later because it's kind of embarrassing.
Is the implication that, so I got the explanation, but is there an implication that this mechanism is different, sure, between the human species and other species, and the perceptual process, but wouldn't it also be that it's different between members of the human species?
Yeah, it's just a difference in degree. I mean, those two things, the difference between individuals of the same species and difference between, you know, different species, individuals of different species, is not really one of kind. I mean, your systems of perception are modified versions of the systems that other species have. So there's at any stage a population of individuals that's one species is going to have enough variation within it that could potentially, you know, under certain selective pressures become a different species. So you have enough variation already within a species to become the kind of variation that you see between species. But I think that it's significant that it's a strong like degree of difference. You have a lot less variation within species than you do between species. And because you have broadly the same structures of collecting light in your eye and the same positioning of the optic nerve between members of the same species, you're going to have more similarity there than you would across species.
But that the inferences in perception are also partly due to things like memory and social experience. And so that's why the difference within the human species is as significant.
Yeah, that's a whole nother level that that I hadn't thought about. So yeah, that's totally right.
It's in the reading. It's about the social context.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a piece that you just put into place for me. So thanks.
Yeah, beyond the physiological, there's the cultural conditioning and the experiences that then add another layer of color to how you perceive things.
Yeah. That's very true.
Yeah. And I just wanted to also say, Diego, I love that you called it an emergent property, because that's a concept that's really helped me, is just thinking how, and I put the definition, or a definition of an emergent property, just it's kind of when an entity becomes part of this bigger system, things emerge that otherwise couldn't happen. So yeah, it's definitely an emergent property of your encounter with that color. It emerges out of that relationship instead of it being a fact out there, you know?
You know, and also two other thoughts that I had. One is that kind of trope, seeing is believing, is kind of like questioned here. You know, the idea of believing and seeing actually fulfill each other. You know, that the idea of the belief in what you see fulfills the picture, means that there's a question of perception that's implicit in the belief in what you see, because it's not exactly the same thing. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is the experience of being in a camera obscura, where you see whatever is outside the camera upside down and backwards, shows you that your optical nerve and your brain invert the picture to see it right side up. So this idea that, you know, we use our eyes and our brains to interpret the world outside of ourselves, I think is something interesting that the author is suggesting we hold that space of liminality, that space between reality and believing, as a kind of metaphoric space for remaining open to the idea that what you see may not be reality. What you see is actually your experience of reality as fulfilled by your perception.
And I also think that it's worth saying that, you know, like they mentioned in the reading, that sometimes that's treated as being illusory, or, you know, just being like a marginal thing that happens and it's sort of an afterthought. But no, that's like the fundamental creation of your perception, and that is reality. I mean, you have, it's not so much that you are perceiving the world as it is that you are taking the world and using it to create your perception, which is, you know, real and present there in and of itself. And it's just as much the world as the field of ingredients that your senses integrate into what becomes the world for you.
Yeah, so it's almost like it's still valid knowledge as long as you take into account your own relationship with the world. It's not like, you know, we can't know anything, but we have to really, again, center the relationship to know anything. I guess it's something like that.
I mean, I want to pick up on Lauren's point about seeing is believing, because I was as you were talking, I was thinking of a very personal experience, because I remember when I was, you know, 4 years old, and we lived in this building, and when I would walk up the top flight of the stairs of that building to the open doorway to the terrace, we lived in an area surrounded by mountains, and the mountains would get taller and taller and taller when I went up the stairs. So as a 4-year-old, to me, the mountain was alive and scary and animate, and a being that was very, that had an animate quality. And, you know, you get that beaten out of you as a person in the living world, and you're like, the mountain is a dead, you know, fixed thing. But people can sort of learn to see things in different ways depending on the messaging and the experience and the narratives about that um, external phenomenon. And so I totally dig this idea of sight not being a mechanical process, because quite simply the interpretation in the brain itself is not fully explicable by neuroscientists. It's a complex that's indeterminate. Actually, it happens in a chaotic way, mixing in sort of the physical mechanics of our retina with the frontal lobe sections, which have the more of the interpretive angle. So yeah, that divided brain that we have, the amygdala, the physical part of it, and then the frontal lobe are just very complex. And so they're right on to say that what we see is not a fixed property.
Totally. And then how we interpret it, like you're saying, like I love that example of the mountain being animate and growing. That's such a beautiful example. Because you could interpret that as some animate qualities that actually are in that mountain, you know what I mean? And not an illusion. I don't know, you know, like how do we interpret that extra layer of explanation is another lens, you know?
Cultural conditioning.
Yep.
Kelly, should we go back to reading number 2?
I think so. I think it's time. We'll share
Okay, I'll just switch my screen share here.
systems view of life.
Thank you, Diego.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Diego, for helping unpack that.
Next time we want to see the full performance.
Yeah, I was gonna, I'm not at home right now, but otherwise I would have made like, I would have done it and like filmed it on the wall so you could see the colors.
Yeah. I asked Diego if he would perform the experiment. So
Maybe later. Maybe
Yeah.
we'll.
Yeah, as
Maybe
soon as I
later.
can, I'll film some.
yeah, we want to see it in interpretive dance form.
Exactly. Yeah.
Nice.
Your hands can be like puppets on the wall.
It'll be some fun shadows that you see getting colored. I guess I can start this reading. So characteristics of systems thinking, shift of perspective from the parts to the whole. The first and most general characteristic of systems thinking is the shift of perspective from the parts to the whole. Living systems are integrated wholes whose properties cannot be reduced to those of smaller parts. Their essential or systemic properties are properties of the whole which none of the parts have. They arise from patterns of organization that are characteristic of a particular class of systems. Systemic properties are destroyed when a system is dissected, either physically or conceptually, into isolated elements. Examples of living systems abound in nature. Every organism, animal, plant, microorganism, or human being is an integrated whole, a living system. Parts of organisms, for example, leaves or cells, are again living systems, and living systems also include communities of organisms. These may be social systems, a family, a business organization, a village, or ecosystems. The systems view of life teaches us that all living systems share a set of common properties and principles of organization. This means that systems thinking is inherently multidisciplinary. It can be applied to integrate academic disciplines and to discover similarities between different phenomena within the broad range of living systems. Throughout the living world, we find systems nesting within larger systems. Cells are parts of tissues, tissues are parts of organs, organs parts of organisms, and living organisms are parts of ecosystems and social systems. At each level, the living system is an integrated whole with smaller components, while at the same time being a part of a larger whole. Ultimately, as quantum physics shows so impressively, there are no parts at all. What we call a part is merely a pattern in an inseparable web of relationships. Therefore, the shift of perspective from the parts to the whole can also be seen as a shift from objects to relationships. In a sense, this is a figure ground shift, as illustrated in figure 4.1. In the mechanistic view, the world is a collection of objects. The objects interact with one another and hence their relationships between them. But the relationships, dotted lines, are secondary. In the systems view, B, we realize that the objects themselves are networks of relationships embedded in larger networks. For the systems thinker, the relationships are primary. The boundaries, dotted lines, of the discernible patterns, the so-called objects, are secondary.
Measuring to mapping, the shift of perspective from objects to relationships does not come easily because it is something that goes counter to the traditional scientific enterprise in Western culture. In science, we have been told things need to be measured and weighed, but relationships cannot be measured and weighed. Relationships need to be mapped. Thus, the perceptual shift from objects to relationships goes hand in hand with the change of methodology from measuring to mapping. When we map relationships, we find certain configurations that occur repeatedly. This is what we call a pattern. Network cycles and boundaries are examples of patterns of organization that are characteristic of living systems and are at the center of attention in systems science. Figure 4.1, figure ground shift from objects to relationships, from Capra 1996. From quantities to qualities. Mapping relationships and studying patterns is not a quantitative but a qualitative approach. Thus, systems thinking implies a shift from quantities to qualities. This has been particularly striking in the recent development of complexity theory, see chapter 6. The new mathematics of complexity is a mathematics of visual patterns, and the analysis of these patterns is known as qualitative analysis, from structures to processes. In the mechanistic framework of Cartesian science, there are fundamental structures, and then there are forces and mechanisms through which these interact, thus giving rise to processes. In system science, every structure is seen as the manifestation of underlying processes. Systems thinking includes a shift of perspective from structures to processes. Since the earliest days of biology, scientists and philosophers have recognized that living form is more than shape, more than a static configuration of components in a whole. There is a continual flow of matter through a living system while its form is maintained. There is growth and decay, regeneration and development. Hence, the understanding of living structure is inextricably linked to the understanding of metabolic and developmental processes. From object to epistemic science. The systemic conception of reality as an inseparable network of relationships has important implications not only for our view of nature, but also for our understanding of scientific knowledge. In Cartesian science, scientific descriptions were believed to be objective, that is, independent of human observer and the process of knowing. System science, by contrast, implies that epistemology, the understanding of the process of knowing, has to be included explicitly in the description of natural phenomena. This recognition entered into science with Werner Heisenberg and is closely related to the view of physical reality as a web of relationships. If we imagine the network pictured in figure 4.1 as much more intricate, perhaps somewhat similar to an ink blot in a Rorschach test, we can easily understand that isolating a pattern in this complex network by drawing a boundary around it and calling it an object will be somewhat arbitrary. Different observers may do it in different ways. To quote Heisenberg once more, what we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. Thus, systems thinking involves a shift from objective to epistemic science, to a framework in which epistemology, the method of questioning, becomes an integral part of scientific theories. The realization that the subjective dimension is always implicit in the practice of science does not mean that we have to give up scientific rigor. When we speak of an objective description in science, we mean first and foremost the body of knowledge that is shaped, constrained, and regulated by the collective scientific enterprise rather than being merely a collection of individual accounts. Such intersubjective validation is standard practice in science and need not be abandoned.
From Cartesian certainty to approximate knowledge. In the epistemic approach to science, nature is seen as an interconnected web of relationships in which the identification of specific patterns as objects depends on the human observer and the process of knowing. This new approach immediately raises an important question. If everything is connected to everything else, how can we ever hope to understand anything? Since all natural phenomena are ultimately interconnected. In order to explain any one of them, we would need to understand all the others, something which is obviously impossible. What makes it possible to turn the systems approach into a proper science is the discovery that there is approximate knowledge. This insight is crucial to all contemporary science. The mechanistic paradigm is based on the Cartesian belief in the certainty of scientific knowledge. In the systemic paradigm, it is recognized that all scientific concepts and theories are limited and approximate. Science can never provide any complete and definitive understanding. In science, to put it bluntly, we never deal with truth in the sense of a precise correspondence between our descriptions and the described phenomena. We always deal with limited and approximate knowledge. This may sound discouraging, but over the last century, scientists have become very used to the approximate nature of scientific knowledge. Indeed, the fact that we can formulate approximate but effective models and theories to describe an endless web of interconnected phenomena, and that we are able to improve our approximations over time, has been a source of confidence and strength in the scientific community. In the 1940s, once the basic systemic concepts, systems level, organization, complexity, emergent properties, etc., had been clarified, some system thinkers began to formulate actual systems theories, meaning that they integrated systemic concepts into coherent theoretical frameworks, describing some of the basic principles of organization of living systems. We shall discuss the development of these classical systems and theories in the following chapter.
Okay, I think that's where we're gonna end for today. I just wanted to highlight that I really enjoyed that last part where he discusses how we can still have understanding of the world as long as we recognize our own participation in that understanding. I don't know, there's something for me in that part that it's like, there's a slippery slope of everything's relative. But if we just recognize relationship as that fundamental underlying piece, then we can start to describe parts of the whole more and more accurately, because we recognize that we're not saying a full truth that's completely crystallized yet, you know? We recognize it's approximate and that there's more to learn always, obviously. It's kind of like the analogy of the blind men describing different parts of an elephant. Made me think of that. But yeah, so now we can discuss a bit. I will just restate some of the questions that I came up with to get us going. The first one was, okay, so in terms of relationships and processes, and I'm thinking both visible and invisible, can you think of can you think of the okay, sorry, let me start over. What relationships and processes, both visible and invisible, can you think of that interconnect seemingly isolated objects? So relationships and processes. And for me, when I was thinking, just contemplating this question briefly, I thought of water, because I feel like water interconnects different surfaces in cities and in places in ways that you wouldn't recognize that one surface that has an oil spill, for instance, was connected all the way down to the outflow into a stream necessarily without that force of water doing, intertwining those spaces that seem like they're separate. So we can start with that question. And I'll just put out the other one too, because we can kind of play with both. They're related. The other one is just examples of your own experience where your own perception or cognition, quote unquote, tricked you into believing something that turned out to be different when you looked at it from another point of view, or when you asked a different question. So I'll just put that out there to the group for stimulation.
Well, I can try. There's you think of the ocean and you think of forests in mountainous areas as two distinct terrestrial ecosystems. But recently we had got the news about the salmon in the Sacramento River, but the salmon take the nutrients that they need to grow into fry from the forest, and then they magically sort of bring it out into the ocean, thousands of miles into the ocean, and then they come all the way back from the ocean, laden with nutrients from the ocean, and they're feeding an entire ecosystem in the forest. All of the animals that eat the salmon are really eating the ocean. So the ocean is sort of inside the forest, and the forest is in the ocean. That's an interconnection.
Yeah, that's a great answer onto, I think, all the, the whole field of ecology is this exact same understanding and realization that you have systems and even organisms that look to be at first glance separate from one another, but they're constantly reconstituting themselves out of each other and really like comprise a greater system that is connected by those relationships and is like sort of mutually cohesive.
I'll follow the forest story. About 3 years ago, in the last big Malibu fire called the Woolsey Fire, after a rain, I took a walk on the beach, and what I saw where the ocean was pulling out from high tide to low tide was a kind of ribbon of burnt forest pieces, like a lacy pattern where you would normally see sea foam, but it was all made up of the ash from the fire that the rains had brought down to the beach. And it really sort of physically manifests the fact that everything becomes part of everything else, that there was no real separation between the Santa Monica Mountains and the Pacific Ocean, that all of the streams and rivers would bring into the ocean, or the ocean is the catch of everything that the mountains deliver to it when there's a rain.
Yeah, I mean, just one thing that immediately comes to mind, of course, is processes of pollination and how an individual bee and flower from far away from each other come together to create fruit that then nourishes all sorts of other animals. And that web of relations is so fundamental. And yet, so it's not the individual bee, it's not the flower, it's not the fruit, it's the relationship between them. And I think if we can just think more and more in terms of that, it helps us to understand how to create regenerative flows through this system of relationships, because it's easy to get caught up. And I think he talks about it in this reading with Cartesian science, really understanding the individual objects or the pieces of the mechanism. There's been a preoccupation in Western science with that, and it's changing. And that's what system science has helped with a lot. And I think that, just recognizing, forefronting. I really like the part too, where he talked about the reversal, the figure ground, like for artists, that figure ground reversal, like you have the figure in this ground, and the ground is just as important, if not more so, than that individual figure. So yeah.
Well, I thought of another one. I don't know if it's apropos in a direct way, but when you see a star in the sky, and then you find out that the light that you're seeing is actually light that was emitted like thousands of years ago, that's traveled through space all of that time, and you realize that that moment where it reaches your eye that moment that is a moment that was like an impossibly long time ago, all collapsing into one moment.
Totally. I feel like that one touches on that second question of how our perception, you can think that light of the star is here and now, and yet it's happening from millions and billions and billions, as Carl Sagan would say, of years ago in time and space. And just shows how perception, you can't just take it for face value.
Keeping on the space theme and the conversation around stars, and me thinking about the moon and how we could be at far reaches of the world, and if there is darkness, we're all looking at the same moon at the end of the day, that it's just different sides of it and where we are in relation to it, but it's the same object that could connect so many people and animals that are looking at it at the same time and affect water in so many different ways too. So it really made me think about that.
Izzy, do you want to talk more about what you wrote in the chat? I feel like that could bear explaining and discussion?
Well, not particularly. 'Cause
Okay,
I
that's
just really like it's kind of marginal, and I don't want to go too far down that line. But I think that distinction between intellect and reason was really helpful for me in the past when thinking about cognition versus knowing and meaning making. I mean, The Life of the Mind is a book basically on how we make meaning, and she says that we do that through sensus communis, which is the sixth sense, which is the sense we share in common, which is something almost more intuitive. And so this kind of goes this. I mean, this is a philosophical text, not coming out of necessarily like a response to science through systems thinking, but yeah, it's a really cool book.
thanks.
Thanks for asking that. Appreciate that.
I had a reflection. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. I had a reflection about the first question about the prompt relationship between things that are not seemingly interconnected, but truly are. I work a lot with, living system, and I had this image of ants as this, how in mainstream science, we love to separate things. This is our way to control things, is we separate things. We do areas and we calculate data. And we have to do it sometimes to gain some kind of control over what we wish to experiment on. And truly, the more I practice and the more I realize that you can't really separate things. And the image I had all the time is ants. Ants can be seen in my job as something that is a phenomenon, something you want to push aside. Ants, they're going to destroy the bee colony, or they're going to invade your compost pile, and truly they are everywhere. And trying to work without the ants, you lose. And more I'm trying to encompass everything. You cannot separate things. Sometimes you have to, because you have to show data and you have to show that you can separate things. But I feel more and more uncomfortable with separating things. And even though I want to be able to connect with people and give them very simple concept by separating data, and the more and more I'm inclined to try to work with everything. And it's very hard. We're not taught to work that way. We're not taught to embrace everything. One other thing that popped in my mind, my daughter is very, very fond of video games. And one of the video games she plays is Animal Crossing. Maybe some of you are familiar with. And there's a stage in a museum where you have exhibit. They are very separated. And so the team from Japan who made this game, they had fun. They acknowledged that ants can be a nuisance and they take over. So in one of the scenes of the museum, you see the ants leaving the exhibition they are bound to, and they start going in the museum and going to the snack room and the water fountain. And I thought it was very sweet that a video game that, digitized reality, acknowledge the fact that, well, ants will do whatever ants do anyway. And in my practice, this is what I see all the time. I separate things. It doesn't work that way. It's an illusion. Actually, separate systems are a complete illusion, but it's very hard to take in the whole entirety of the universe coming to you and in your face and saying, deal with us. And anyway, it's a wonderful trip to work with everything at the same time, but it's daunting. That's all.
Totally. That reminds me too of the concept of approximate knowledge, which was talked about in our readings tonight too, of like being comfortable with the fact that you are describing a part of the whole and but like to be able to describe the complete interconnected nature of everything, we can't, So what we can get better and better at recognizing that we are describing parts of a larger network, that opens up space for new thought, new connections and growth. in ways that if, you're thinking in terms of objects instead of relationships, you might not be able to do. So I like that idea of approximate knowledge, and it's still valid knowledge. It's just approximate,
I mean, I had a problem with I couldn't quite make the leap that he made suddenly between looking at things in systemic relationships and that being an epistemic activity. I mean, I understand the limitations of the traditional Cartesian view of individual objects, and I understand viewing things in terms of relationships, but the exercise of science is to sort of interact with the world to kind of understand reality. But as soon as you do that, you have to look at entire systems of meaning in which science is operating. And to me, that's not just epistemic, that's also linguistic, and that's also metaphysical. And so this reading left me with the impression that he's sort of saying, oh, let's, Cartesian is so yesteryear, let's leave that behind. Let's look at this in more of a systemic relational way. But he's again sort of universalized that approach to knowledge when that itself is a problem. I'm not sure if, I haven't read the whole book, so I'm not sure if that was his intent, but that's the impression I got, that you can't just finish with relationships, because certainly, indigenous knowledge systems use, it never would see something isolated, use it as relational, but it also doesn't, make that sort of only way of knowing things. The one thing that was really missing in Cabra's text was that it's all very contextual to place. It's bound to place. So that place-bound understanding of relationships is important. The language that you use in order to describe that relationship is important. So it's linguistic meaning, and also the metaphysical meaning, how you view your place in the world. And those things were left out. So that left me a little bit uncomfortable with the reading, but yeah.
That makes sense to me too. I think that the other reading, the first reading we did, touched a little bit more on the influence of language and things on our own perception, and so kind of supplements some of that lack from Friedhoff's work. But yeah, again, it's one reading, like you said, from a whole book, and he may have sections that touch on some of those things more fully.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing to take from this is that science is a worthwhile and valid activity, but it's just the system of meaning that we put it in is so significant to the way that it has consequences in the world, and that's worth really picking apart and understanding. And I think that's the age we're in right now, to pick apart this system of meaning, which we sort of cling to like we're like cavemen from 300 years ago, despite the knowledge produced by all kinds of exciting new science.
Absolutely. That was actually a really nice kind of summary of some of the core ideas, I think, that were embedded in there, that the systems of meaning, that we need to be aware of those, and that science is embedded in part of them. So it's not objective, complete truth. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a really good point, Ansu and Kelly. And I think that in many ways, what I think we're being asked to kind of hold just from last week is this idea of paradox and the idea of quantum or energy and Taoism, which is the idea that everything and nothing are part of the same cycle of experience. And I think basically, I think what we're being asked to kind of consider today is the limitations of Cartesian logic, that we hold a space of uncertainty for the idea that what seems to be is not what is, and that the Cartesian model is asking us to use our facilities of reason to evolve a philosophy based on human reason, and that it's the limitation of that is not to say that it isn't a good example of, or it isn't a usable example to describe reality. It's just not a complete one. That there's a world beyond the Cartesian, that both the philosophy of Taoism, Buddhism, and the idea of quantum physics have sort of shown us, which I think Misha's example of the ants and my example of the stars have something in common, in that the ants kind of will remove the order that you try and create on something. They're kind of like they embody the uncertainty principle, because whatever you think you're doing, they're going to undo pretty quickly. And starlight and star twinkle is such a magical thing to watch, but it isn't what you think it is. Like there's a lot more to it than literally meets the eye. So I think that the systems view of life is sort of saying that we can only know as human beings that which we can perceive within the limitations of both our lifespan and our physical limitations, even our optical limitations. So yeah, I think that these first 2 weeks of this system thinking is asking us to just be aware that we can draw conclusions based on our empirical knowledge the way Descartes did. But we can also experience that everything we know can be thrown on its head, as we've all experienced, even living through the pandemic. That everything that we think was life and interactional way of being on the planet changed really radically in the last couple of years, which kind of revealed a whole other level of the way a virus can spread, another organism that's coexisting within us, around us, can take over and redefine reality for us in a very kind of quick way. So I think COVID-19 would be an example of what I would pull into the question of something that's changed my perception of reality rather quickly, and is still doing that. Like even this weird sort of half, where are we over it? Are we not over it? Like what's going on?
I mean, one thing that COVID-19 has done a great service, I think, to the whole world is to remind us that we are organisms, and that pathogens and viruses have always been with us, and our immune systems are magnificent, unfathomably brilliant architecture to use to defend us against millions of viruses and pathogens, and that each human being is really an animal and we're living in these societies. And one of the things I thought about was how much we ended up well, perhaps not, but the globe ended up cooperating with strategies and science knowledge and stuff, because we all were faced with that threat. So it was really telling of how our species faced the threat and responded, and we just became much more conscious of our biological selves in this whole process.
I have to totally agree with you, Ansu, on that. That's an interesting reflection because, yeah, it's like this. I still find myself going into a store and being afraid of some invisible, vulnerability. And it's just, yeah, I think in our modern world, it's easy to forget that we're part of this network of living things. And it did bring that up. Definitely brought that up, this virus. Great. I think at this point we're getting to the end of the evening, and Jen, I think you wanted to maybe share, or we might want to share some works in progress, or
Absolutely.
We thought we would do what we usually do at the beginning, which is the popcorn introductions, but Jen will sort of set us off by showing us what she's doing, and then popcorn it to somebody else, and we'll say who we are and what our pronouns are and where we're calling in from and what we're working on at the end instead of the beginning, to see how that goes.
So I'll start. I'm Jen. I'm calling in from Studio City, and I use she, her pronouns. And for the last 2 weeks, I've been working on the mycelium roots carbon exchange. It's from the microscopic series Underground.
Wow.
And I'm just doing just a I think it's just like a basic satin stitch.
So beautiful. Jen, what color is that? Is that black?
It's like a purpley blue. And I'm thank you. I'm thinking of coloring it in with a lighter purple down here. I have to tell you, this is truly, this one is like eating popcorn. I can't stop. I keep saying, oh, I'll just do 5 more minutes, and then 45 minutes goes by and I'm like, oh, I gotta go to bed. But this is what I'm working on, and we'll be probably working on for the rest of the night. And I will pass it to Alex.
Hey guys, I'm Alex. I go by he, him pronouns. All right, so I have been working on this for a while we talk and do our mending, and I think I'm done. So I'm kind of excited. So this is what I'm doing. I'm a little stitching here, but I got something going on there.
Wow!
Wow!
Yeah.
I ran out of colors, and I just switched colors and just kind of.
Can you put it up again, Alex?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was too fast.
This is
That's beautiful.
my last part right here.
Those so the stitches almost look like patches. They're amazing.
Yeah, well, I'm glad.
Yeah.
It's my very first one. So I arrived a little late, so I'll pass it to. Has somebody not gone? Jinko, have you spoken?
None of us have gone.
We didn't do
We didn't do it at the beginning. We're doing it at the end. Yeah.
Okay. Caroline, how are you?
Hello, good evening. My name is Caroline, and I call from Studio City. I use she, her pronoun. And I just got back from a beautiful trip in Washington State, where I was staying on islands near Seattle, Whidbey Island and Marrowstone Island. And so I'm just landing just for this beautiful salon. Yes. So I'll pass it to Millie.
Hi everyone, my name is Millie. I go by she, her pronouns. I'm actually zooming in from Glassell Park, California, very near to the LA River. And tonight I just wanted to read along and really comprehend tonight's reading. I read it last night with my husband and found it really, really fascinating. And now I will pass it on to Ginkgo Lee.
Can you hear me? Yes. Hi, I'm Ginkgo. This is my first time to be here, and thank you. I was a friend of Sylvia Home that was here before, so I just get back from Taiwan, where I went study for 2 years, and very happy to back to Pasadena, California. So I'm so thrilled to have all of you to be embroidering with me. So what I'm doing is this patchwork that I just randomly done, and I have a lot of fun doing it. And I was planning to make it into maybe a mending or something else. And this is my first time I have to say that I truly enjoy this gathering, food for thoughts and something to keep the hand busy. So I'm looking forward to more time to spend with this group, lovely group here. Thank you so much.
Can you show it again? Can you show it again?
Okay, yes. This is
Beautiful.
Wow. Beautiful.
I just did
Beautiful.
together with everyone, and this is a piece from an old hiking jeans that my husband have. So we are going to use it to repair something else, and this is another of the patterns that somehow when you say about Taoism, and I would kind of this circling pattern come to mind. So this topic has been very inspiring, and I totally enjoy being here. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank
Pick someone else.
Okay, may I pick Irena?
Hi, Derainer Holland calling in from Baldwin Hills, California, and I go by she, her pronoun, and I am working on this
She's at the moon.
hummingbird.
Oh, she's got her screen share.
How funny. Wow.
Let's see again. I
Yeah,
couldn't
gotta put it up closer.
Oh wait, you have to take your background off.
That's so funny.
Oh, okay.
You don't have to.
Okay. Let's
It's
see.
all right.
No virtual.
Are you in the bathtub?
No.
Oh my God. That's
Oh,
so
wow.
beautiful. Look at that.
Oh, beautiful leaves.
I'm hoping to finish this soon, sooner than later. And I will pass it on to Emily.
Hi everyone, Emily here in Echo Park. She, her pronouns. I did some drawing tonight. Let me grab my drawing. Oh, I just dropped everything. Here's some drawing that I did.
Oh, fun.
Interconnected.
Yeah.
Wholeness.
And last week's session, I did this one. So I'm kind of getting into these
Wow.
detail, almost like drawing as embroidery kind of vibe. And then I started folding my clothes and mending the house, taking care of the house. So yeah, great to be with you all. And let me pass it to my friend Stefano.
Hi, from the moon. And I'm sorry, I don't have any embroidery to show you, but I'm really liking yours. So, very cool. And maybe I'll have something one day. I don't know. But this said, Izzy, what have you been working on?
Hi. I've been working on, first I want to say that I dedicate this to Jen because the back, Jen always shows the beautiful backs of the embroideries when they're really good. In the back, so I've been thinking about Jen this whole time. I have to I have to. But here's the one. It's the little.
Oh, beautiful.
And I'm trying really hard to keep it clean.
Whoa!
Nice.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, that's a clean backing.
Wow.
It's like a two-sided embroidery.
I'm trying. It's still, I don't have down. I'm trying. We'll see. My pronouns are they, she, and I'm calling from East Hollywood. So I will call on Aaron.
Hello, my name is Aaron. I go by he, him. I'm in Altadena, California, and I have just been folding some clothes and listening very intently and reading the chat because I'm really interested in this discussion. I spend a lot of my time thinking about systems, and I don't do a lot of reading about it or talking to people that are thinking about the same thing. It's just a lot of my internal dialogue is often about systems. And so I've been very, very interested in this group and this discussion. And just to add to the conversation, I came up with a definition for systems in my own thinking before I've ever read anything about it or heard anyone talk about it. And my definition is a system is a set of instructions with the apparatus required to translate that set of instructions. So maybe someday I'll write that down and add it to the chat and see if there's any response. And I will pick Diego.
Hi, I'm Diego. I'm calling from New York City, New York. I use he, him pronouns. And today I was just sharing my screen and following along with the reading. Normally I would be drawing, but not today. So thanks everyone. I can pass it to Mish now.
And Mish or Michelle, he, him, Highland Park. I've been working on ants and stars and chaos. And also the fact that when you stitch, you have to break down your lines. You have little elements. So I did a lot of, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's
Wow.
Oh my God.
What?
Wow, that's so cool.
Whoa. What? Whoa.
Oh my God. Amazing.
Wait, did you do that all tonight?
No, I did two.
Oh, okay. Do you have a whole house full of ants with you doing that?
The ants, I try to leave them where I work, and then when I come here, I try to let go. But the discussion brings them back to me, so I have to do something about it and interpret it in a non-threatening way. So that's my way of dealing with ants and stars and chaos. And it's very good for me to hear all the discussion because that's not something that's easy to have with other people when you don't have the time. So it's like a sacred place where I can hear things that are good for me to process. At this point, I don't know who didn't have a chance, so if you want to, go on.
I think we're kind of running low on time, so we might wrap it up unless, and I'll Jen, did you have any last things you wanted to add? Okay.
No,
Okay, well, I just want to thank you guys all for coming. I've been feeling really nourished by this group. It feels very generative, and like, even if we don't understand every single thing that we're reading, like just having those ideas flow over you and reflecting on a few key pieces, like I'm really loving being here. So I just wanted to say that and invite you guys back for next week. And next week, we're going to be looking closer at networks as a primary pattern of living systems. So we'll be thinking about networks next week, and I hope you can join us, and we'll do some mending and sharing. And thank you all so much for your contributions and perception and cognitive realities coming together in this space together. So we'll see you guys next week, and thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Great seeing everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Amazing presentations.
Bye, Laura.
I was looking on the phone most of the time. It was really beautiful. Thank you so much. It's like amazing to hear those rings. Especially what was at the top of the hearing about the blind spot. We don't know about the blind spot So that was a great framing for the beginning of the whole thing. So thank you so much for the choosing of the readings, the choices of the readings.
Of course. Well, we'll see you next week. I'm having trouble hearing you a little bit. It's kind of coming in and out. I hope you can hear me. I'll see you next week. I think you froze. Bye.